All right. Well, welcome everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Aaron Goldenberg, Professor and Vice Chair in the Department of Bioethics here at Case Western Reserve University. I also direct the Case Bioethics Center for Community Health and Genomic Equity. On behalf of the center and our faculty and staff and students, we welcome you to the third annual Patricia Marshall Lecture on Genomics and Equity. This annual event highlights scholars and scholarship in the areas of genetics, health disparities, community health, and equity. The lecture is sponsored and hosted by the Case Western Reserve University Center for Community Health and Genomic Equity, whose mission it is to support and foster community-engaged research, education, and service that advances health and health care equity through all of genomics research and clinical integration. This lecture is named in honor of Professor Emerita Patricia Marshall, who has long championed genomic equity through her work in the ethical, legal, social issues associated with genetics and genomics, as well as her work in research ethics and the protection of human subjects. And we're so honored to be able to have Patty here with us today to provide some remarks before our main lecture. Patricia Marshall is a Professor Emerita of Bioethics and has worked in the field of bioethics for more than 40 years. Her research...
How old am
I'm not saying a word. I'm just, Her research and scholarly publications have focused on national and international research ethics, genetics and informed consent, and cultural diversity in bioethics practices. Dr. Marshall was the co-director of the Center for Genomic Research, Ethics, and Law here in the School of Medicine alongside Dr. Eric Jungst and Dr. Richard Sharp, and really provides a legacy of addressing both genetics and ethics issues here at Case, and also ethics and equity issues in our community and nationally and internationally. This year, we are so honored and excited to have Professor Shawneequa Callier from George Washington University as our annual speaker. Professor Callier is an associate professor with tenure at the university in the Department of Clinical Research and Leadership at the George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences. She also has served as a special volunteer at the Center for Research on Genomics and Global Health at the National Human Genome Research Institute for over 13 years. She has nearly 2 decades of experience analyzing the ethical, legal, and social implications of emerging technologies, and she works on various projects funded by the U.S. National Institutes of Health that focus on ELSI of genomics, research, and data science. But in addition to being an amazing scholar and an amazing colleague, she is part of our academic family. Professor Callier did her postdoc in our center here at Case Western and did her training with us and with Dr. Marshall. And so it is really an honor to have her back talking with us, sharing with us, learning with us, and teaching us. And we're just really just so thrilled to have her as our annual lecturer. It's like bringing a family member back to us. And it's really just a special to have a former trainee come and share her wisdom with us today. Before passing the mic over to Dr. Marshall, who'll give a few remarks, I wanted to just say a couple quick thank yous. I want to thank you to the Change team for their support in making today's lecture happen, including our staff and our students. I want to have a special thank you to Drs. Marcia Mickey and Lynette Gerardo for your amazing leadership in the center. And a very special thank you to our Assistant Director, Roselle Ponceron, for her tireless work to organize not only this event, but all the work of Change. Lastly, I want to thank Dr. Mark Alicio, the chair of our Department of Bioethics, for his continued support of not only the center, this lectureship, and all the activities we're doing in the areas of genomics and equity. So it's a real honor to first introduce Patty, who will give us a little introduction and some remarks about Shawneequa. Thank you so much.
Where am I going to start? Aaron is a good man. That's the most important thing. I guess, what?
We have people online.
Oh, sorry. Okay, is this better?
Yeah.
Shawneequa, get on over here. Oh. I want to tell you something right now. Shawneequa is a treasure of joy. Is that right?
You are, Patty.
No.
You are.
Well, sometimes I am,
Always.
but it is such a gift to have Shawnee here.
Be here.
We go back many, many years, much longer than, oh gosh, you were reminding me last night, 2009. Oh, forget that. It's like beyond when I was born.
It
That's how
feels
long.
much longer. It does.
Can you all hear what Shawneequa?
Yes, I have a mic also.
Oh, good. So you're going to be walking,
Maybe.
probably. And probably you're going to show embarrassing
I
photographs.
have some photos.
Yeah, I knew it. I knew it. Can I say one thing real quick?
Please.
But you know this already. For those of you, many of you know already this thing about me that is so true. My mother was one of 17 children, all from the same family. And I am one of 59 first cousins just on my mom's side. I'm number 27. Is that like a trip or what? And so you can imagine being raised in a village. The truth is that that's how I experience all of you, even those of you who I haven't met yet. I think of that notion of the village as a metaphor for possibilities. And my life has been rich in possibilities that have come true. And stick this to your brain. Don't forget it. Stick it to your heart. It's possibilities of the heart through people that give so much richness to us. Oh, the stories I could tell about you. One time, so
Please say something funny so I don't start tearing up.
there are so many things I could say. So, Shawnee, when I lived here, I used to have a big giant house. Everybody would be in the house, especially the kitchen. You know, you've been in my kitchen. And one time, I don't know where the heck I was, I picked up a CD. Do you remember this?
Yes, yes.
And what was on that CD?
R&B and hip hop music.
Hip hop
Christmas music.
from like the early days.
Yes, old school hip hop, which is
so-
very different from the new stuff that's out right now.
Yeah, and so it was just like this random thing. And so I'm like, I'm going to get this. I'm going to put it on when everyone's in the kitchen. And Shawneequa, you and I were like back. Remember how the back steps, we were standing back there. And here is the entire kitchen filled with people in a wave like this.
Yes.
Because who cannot be dancing?
Very good memories.
We just have so many. That's just one of them. Or like that time when you were riding your bike to the picnic. You know,
I attempted to ride my bike to the picnic.
So
And the
what
GPS told
happened?
me that the picnic was closer than it really was.
so,
So I was riding for a really long time.
so I'm like, remember Mr. Bentley?
Yes.
My big old,
Yes, and he used to play with Mr. Pickles.
oh my God. And Bentley was huge and
Yes.
Pickles was small.
That's right.
So I'm driving down Richmond Road,
I can't remember what road. Fairmont.
Fairmont. And so I'm like, what the? I think this is Shawneequa
On a beach cruiser.
on a bike. So I pulled off and I'm standing at the corner watching you come up. Like, get on over here.
And we loaded the bike and me into the car. And I made it was a retreat. and I made it to the retreat.
Oh my
But
God.
for you, I might still be riding that bike right now.
Anyway, I think I've said enough.
Thank you, Patty.
You are just, well, what did I say? A treasure of joy.
It's a joy to be here, Patty, and to be here providing a lecture in your name. It's such a great full circle. Thank you.
You know, there you go.
Thank you, Patty.
I love
I
you.
love you too.
I love you. Okay.
All right, I was worried I might start to tear up, which would be a first for a lecture for me. Oh boy. Let's see. I think what I'll do is I'll just start with some photos, as is customary. Yes, I want to make sure Patty gets to her seat comfortably and carefully. So it is really amazing to be here and to see friends and colleagues, friends who are like family, who really, truly feel like family, and to have a chance to talk. This is probably not only the first time I thought I might cry before a lecture, but probably one of the most fun trips for a lecture and for meeting with students, because I knew how much time I would have having dinner and just chatting and catching up and thinking about old times. And I thought, gosh, I better finish my slides long before I get to Cleveland because I'm going to want to enjoy every moment while I am here. And so far that's been the case. And I'm really excited that I have another day tomorrow, and then I'll get to know some of you who are here in this room.
Shawneequa,
Yes.
that's May.
Yes, it
Guys,
is.
That's my kitchen.
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's me in my kitchen.
Absolutely. So I'll get to the photos, but I'm going to start by saying that 12 years ago, I walked into Patty Marshall's office. That's where I met her for the first time. I read her work, of course. I mentioned her in my essay when I applied to be a postdoc here, but I had no idea what a force of nature I was about to meet. In what was a 1-hour interview that felt like all of 10 minutes, I traveled through memory lane with Patty from Chicago, where she did field work, to Africa. I learned about the informed consent work she did in various African countries, and she showed me pictures of her colleagues who became her friends. I saw a woman I wanted to be like. Her warmth, passion, and friendships were developed through meaningful and important work, and I got to experience that while I was here. It's so special to return here where my academic career started, where Patty was a mentor, champion, and friend over a decade ago. I owe many of my collaborations today to Patty because she said nice things about me when I wasn't there, to some of the people I work with now. My best memories of Cleveland took place at Patty's house, where she made fresh chili for academic discussions about bioethics and public health, and introduced us to students like Meg, colleagues and friends across disciplines. I can still taste the berry pies that almost always accompanied our meals. They were the best pies you will ever have, and Patty made them by hand. She also hosted potlucks. Charlize and I, pictured here from our time as young postdocs, helping out. Charlize is pictured helping out with a Ugandan meal one of your students made, Patty, and I was helping Charlize make a Filipino meal in your kitchen. This is the memorable dance party that we had in the kitchen. I think I spent Thanksgiving at Patty's house, along with others once who were still in town for the holidays. And during a Christmas party, Patty showed us a really neat hip hop Christmas CD that she put on, and we all started dancing. And so that is just such a great memory of good times we had. We've shared many fun moments together. As many of you know, our center director at the time, Eric Youngst, he makes armor as a hobby. And so one year we all dressed up in the pieces Eric collected and we traveled together to a medieval festival for food, music, and fellowship. Do you remember that, Aaron? All of us were dressed in armor. Unfortunately for me, maybe fortunately for everyone else, I don't know, I couldn't find all of the pictures. The other picture is when we all got together and dressed up for Halloween and had dinner at Patty's house. So just great memories. I remember growing as a scholar here. This is where it all started for me. I transitioned out of law. I was practicing at a law firm for 3 years, and I came here for a change. And so this is where my happiness as an academic started. I also built friendships here, of course, mostly at Patty's house. I've never experienced another gathering like those that occurred at Patty's house, mostly because it requires Patty to be there. So thank you. Thank you, Patty, for being such a special part of my journey. Thank you, Eric, if you're listening, Sharona, Rich, Aaron, Michelle, if you're listening, Max, if you're listening, Charlize, Marie, Marcy. The list really goes on. John. Thank you all so much. So I guess I'm supposed to give a lecture too. So I'll get started on that. I don't have any financial or other conflicts of interest, and these opinions should be construed as purely my own. I want to transition into the topic I'll spend the rest of my time discussing: what kinds of measurable actions can help us achieve equity in genomics research? And what can I say about the way we use data that's new? I want to set us up with a quote from Dr. Tina Campt that might provide some insight into my concerns and inspiration for my talk today. During a 2021 Princeton University African American Studies podcast, Dr. Campt talked about her work trying to understand the lives of Africans living in Germany. This episode stood out to me because it reminded me of a problem in genomics research. In her work, she is trying to tell a story about the people who are largely missing from the historical data she is searching. She asked herself, what kind of sources can one find if you're trying to write a history of a group of people who have been overlooked or erased? She said she is listening to the silences in an archive, listening to the gaps in historical records, and listening to the gaps in the way in which people talk about themselves, because they're all very revealing. She also said she is thinking about the way in which society saw them or did not see them. While she is talking about societal and political dynamics and another country, there is relevance here. Our colleagues in Genomics and ELSI are on a quest to include diverse voices, populations, and stories, if you will, in our research data, with a goal of using these data to help alleviate health disparities. So much of what populations are included and how groups are described involves issues around representation. Who gets to ask the questions and the political and social labels we use? Who gets to define them? At the same time, many of the largest sources of funding and biobanks are directed from the standpoint of European and United States interests. Historically, people around the world have been placed in categories and studied in contexts that diminish power, representation, and visibility. The good news is we are witnessing a change. Funders and investigators are seeking to change the narrative and make research more equitable. As we include more diverse populations and more voices in research, we greatly need, I think now more than ever, we need experts in ELSI, including health equity experts, to develop the frameworks that can help us listen to these silences. So where will we be 20 years from now? My agenda today is to underscore and amplify ongoing efforts to increase representation in genomics data and the genomics workforce, and to add to this discussion with some questions specifically about equity. I'm going to talk about two issues that have arisen with the context of historical genomics research environments and priorities with an eye toward the future. Diverse and inclusive research is an ethical and scientific imperative. That's why this matters. That's why equity has to be baked into our work. How do we translate diverse data into measurable, equity-driven actions that will lead to reductions in health inequities? I think many of us in this room are interested in this question, many of us in the ELSI field. Second, I'll share some example of how we undermine our goals. I will describe repeat trade-offs that investigators make when researching and developing new methods and tools that systematically de-emphasize equity. As we build our future together, how can we better translate our data? Will our decisions matter? To give you a preview, I'm going to argue that we need a governance system and ongoing empirical, normative, and legal scholarship to evaluate the ethics of trade-offs made in genomics research that undermine the potential for advancing equity. I know that I may be teetering on sensitive territory because scientists have academic freedom to make research decisions. But when scientists systematically make judgment calls that undermine their very claimed goals of achieving equity, and with scarce federal research dollars, that's a signal that robust frameworks need to be normalized, just as we have standardized ethics, IRB review, and informed consent. Let's see. Okay. So 21 years ago, geneticists sequenced the human genome and developed the ELSI project. Since then, we have struggled as a field to achieve diverse representation. In 2020, in a special issue about the future of genomics, Dr. Amy McGuire and other ELSI researchers and colleagues argued in favor of a number of needed changes in genomics that go far beyond recruitment and obtaining genetic data. So they talked about meaningful engagement, improved transparency, robust systems of accountability, a commitment to creating opportunities that support the workforce and include scientists and clinicians from underrepresented populations. Similarly, in a science issue celebrating 20 years of the Human Genome Project, my colleagues and I wrote, this was in 2021, the genomics community needs to value diverse samples and analyses and conclusions, as well as to focus resources on capacity building and removing barriers to creating a diverse workforce. Here are some perspectives and research results published in recent years. In the literature, there have been many attempts to raise awareness about the importance of diversity in genomics research, and there have been efforts by leading institutions and funders to sequence diverse genomes. And so I will say the advancements and innovations related to sequencing genomes from diverse populations have been exciting and promising. I'll just give you two examples. The All of Us research program experienced great success recruiting from diverse populations and engaging communities. It reported that it released over 245,000 genome sequences, 77% from historically underrepresented communities, 46% from underrepresented racial and ethnic groups. As a result of the diversity of this data set, the researchers identified more than 275 million previously unreported genetic variants, more than 3.9 million of which have coding sequences. These types of discoveries benefit us all because they help us to understand global human genome diversity. For instance, with these discoveries, the benefits of drugs targeting particular genetic variations can include many more ancestry groups than those included in the underlying study. Here's another example. In 2024, that's this year, the authors of the Million Veterans Program, which partnered with community-based sites affiliated with VA facilities, wrote that current GWAS results are limited by underrepresentation, and so they thought to fix that. The MVP program conducted GWASs across over 2,000 traits in 4 population groups. 29% of populations had predominant ancestries from outside of Europe. They identified over 26,000 variant trait associations across over 1,200 traits, and almost 3,500 of them were discovered because the cohort was diverse. So these examples are what I was talking about when I said there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of great promise with genomics. But my message to you today, especially as scholars in these fields, is that we should not get too comfortable. Despite the ongoing calls for diversity and inclusion and the encouraging results of recent studies, percentages of publications of genome-wide association study data still include very low percentages from diverse global populations. And so this was an image I took from the Genome-Wide Association Data Monitor, which monitors publications including diverse ancestries less than a month ago. Due to dramatic drops in genotyping and the cost of sequencing, GWASs are commonly used to study the genetics of natural variation. A typical GWAS today includes thousands to hundreds of thousands of individuals. Depending on the trait being studied, a GWAS can include 1 million samples. What is happening during the research and dissemination process that contributes to these low numbers of representation from diverse groups? GWAS are now also used to inform polygenic score development. Polygenic scores are estimates of how likely a person is to have a particular trait based on the weighting of multiple genes in the genome. In 2019, Martin and her co-authors wrote, and I'm going to quote here, "These assessments are becoming increasingly feasible with the growth and public availability of global biobanks and priorities from funding agencies. However, prediction accuracy decayed across globally diverse populations for 17 traits in the UK Biobank." And this finding was in alignment with what others have found. Genetic prediction accuracy is far lower for other populations than for people who have ancestry from European populations. So it's far lower for people with ancestries from outside of Europe. I want to spend the majority of my time on how important it is for equity to be included at every stage of the research process and in our standards for research. The field of genomics has led to so many technological breakthroughs that could increase diversity and inclusion in analysis, but there has been limited study of what makes these projects equitable beyond an argument that diversity will lead to equity. For the next breakthrough research approach, for the next big method that we use, if it's not GWAS, if it's not polygenic scores, maybe it will have something to do with genomics and artificial intelligence. What will we see in terms of how well the technology works in diverse populations and the inclusion of diverse populations? And so specifically, how do we better institutionalize equitable decision-making as we integrate more and more diverse samples and data? Here are articles I'll reference throughout my talk, starting first with a 2017 article by my colleagues, Dr. Amy Bentley and Dr. Charles Rotimi. We detailed some of the impediments to publishing, obtaining funding, and applying new technologies when seeking to study diverse populations. We show how incentives to publish and attract funding draw scientists away from studying diverse populations. An important question we ask then is, a question, we asked it in 2017, but it's still very relevant today. Given the scientific and equity motivations for including diverse populations in research, and as I just showed you, the contrasting underrepresentation in published results, it's reasonable to ask whether current approaches are enough to affect change. In 2020, Ben Egan and colleagues found that even when data from minority groups are available, many researchers discard them, exacerbating the problem of underrepresentation and, as they write, compromising participants' efforts to contribute to research. So as we know, built into the genomics research project, if biases are built into the genomics research process, this can lead to low representation, but also low sensitivity of the sequencing tools and false positives for most of the global population. 2 years ago, to give you an example, Mayo Clinic researchers reported that Black participants in the Cancer Genome Atlas received lower quality exome sequencing. Patients with predominantly African ancestries were sequenced at statistically significantly lower depth in 6 out of the 7 cancers examined. In some cases, the authors argued that the reasons for the lower depth sequencing was unknown, but in other cases, they attributed it to low representation. As these articles and those on the previous slide have reported, we can anticipate bias in tool, method, and technology development. The articles included on this slide express concern around how biases in research might impact the future of healthcare and advancements in healthcare that integrate these biases into genomics, and I've also included an article on genomics and artificial intelligence. Given this understanding, there is a necessity for more clarity in our fields concerning our ethical responsibilities. What are the duties of researchers? We should not only anticipate bias as we can, but take steps to address it early in the development and the design of research. So this brings me to the topic of genomics trade-offs. And I'll just take a little break and say that early this morning I checked my email, and in the subject line there was an article about the danger of trade-offs. And so I thought, well, obviously this is the universe telling me that I chose the right topic for today, or my email provider is reading my email. I don't know which one it is. I can't answer any questions about that, but if you have thoughts, please let me know later on. So as I've shown, our colleagues in Genomics and ELSI have emphasized the importance of diversity and inclusion in genomics and health research as an essential component. But it may be taken for granted that once we have data we need, and even once we have the community input we need and we invest in community engagement efforts, that we will no longer have biases in our analyses. NHGRI and others have invested a great deal in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we also, I don't have time to talk about them today, but we also have laws to promote diversity and inclusion in research. But how do we ensure that researchers choose to do the analyses that will promote equity? And that's something we're struggling with, even though these laws exist. Scientists are often pulled in directions away from choosing equity when they make genomics research trade-offs. So I'm going to turn back to the Ben Egan article that I mentioned earlier, and tell you a little bit more about what they found. So the authors sought to estimate how often minoritized populations are excluded from data analysis, even when the data contains data from diverse populations. So they focused on the UK Biobank, which had over 502,000 individuals, and the US Health Retirement Study of over 12,000 individuals. The authors compared the criteria for researchers that were used to either include or exclude data from majority groups or minoritized groups. So majority groups were those who identified as white or had European ancestry. Minoritized groups were everybody else. So they counted a minoritized population consisting of individuals, and they examined various articles. So out of 21 articles from the GWAS catalog, including the UK Biobank, out of 21 articles, 20 restricted their analysis to only white patients and European ancestries. Out of another 20 GWAS that relied on UK Biobank data, another 20 articles, only one used data from minoritized populations. The US study produced better results. Out of the 17 studies, only 6 limited their analysis to white populations or people with European ancestries. The authors argued that this is likely because the proportion of diverse participants in the US Biobank is higher than the one in the UK. The authors concluded that both the UKB, the UK Biobank, and the HRS made efforts to represent their national populations. However, I quote, including individuals from minority groups in data cohorts, but not an analysis, can be seen as de facto tokenism. Unused data do not help unrepresented groups. They added that of the 45 studies that excluded data from diverse populations, 31 of them did not provide a reason or justification. So there are a variety of trade-offs that may be at the root of this problem. Concern about confounding is a common challenge in GWAS studies. It is difficult to assess the significance of an association when data produce confounding effects. To give you an example, imagine that we are all interested in what genes are associated with heart disease. In real-world environments, there are many factors that could lead to heart disease, including but not limited to genetics. If you are studying a population that includes many people who smoke, you may see genetic signals related to smoking, which are also related. The signals are related to smoking, but the smoking is related to heart disease. So the signals you see may not be the underlying signals that you're interested in for your genomic association study. If you can adjust for confounders like smoking habits, then you can better understand the roles of the genes that are correlated. This problem shows how important it is to understand the cultural and environmental factors that can impact a GWAS. In genomics, so let's switch now to the genomics context, diverse ancestries can also confound results. So to improve accuracy, diverse ancestries are treated as factors to be controlled for. Different populations with diverse evolutionary and geographic histories can cause false positive correlations because the frequencies of genetic variation will differ between groups as well as traits. So large population studies can be confounded by different environmental factors and genetic backgrounds, which make it harder to control for confounding factors that are often in studies of diverse populations can be very complex. So in the Nature article by Ben Egan and co-authors, there were a number of reasons investigators gave for excluding diverse populations. The most common explanation was fear of confounding. And so here are some real-world publications that discuss confounding and challenges of studying diverse populations in plain language. In 2005, in one of the very first GWAS, the authors explained that the study population is European, noting of European ancestries, noting this focus was necessary to prevent accuracies. So you can see the language up above. All individuals self-identify their ethnicity as non-Hispanic white. Ben Egan and colleagues described this trade-off as follows. Because finding a genetic association can be enough to garner a publication, adding analysis of other populations comes at a cost. It takes time, makes the manuscript more complicated, gives reviewers one more thing to criticize, and so could delay publication. I don't have empirical data, but I do have anecdotal data that this is still a problem in submitting studies today. The early GWAS I just referenced included 146 individuals, and they were Utah residents with ancestry from Northern and Western Europe. Since the genetic research community has historically focused on European ancestry populations, the samples now are much larger. So I explained now that we're talking about thousands, hundreds of thousands, even 1 million. Here's a chart of participants by ancestry in 2008, and the percentages of associations found from these ancestry groups. You can see how much in the I don't know how well you can see this, but participants by ancestry are here on the left, and then the count of all associations discovered are on the right here. So you can see how much even a small percentage of diverse populations can lead to discovery. Now that the overwhelming majority of well-characterized, well-studied genomic research cohorts have European ancestry, it is expected that all contemporary studies will have the same power. So one of the points we make in our 2017 paper on the slow and uneven progress in genomics research diversity is that for GWAS of diverse populations, which have not yet reached such high sample sizes, this expectation may be a hardship. Data from smaller sample sizes, for instance, are harder to get published even when the findings are meaningful. You can see that the percentages of diverse populations included in GWAS publications seemed higher in 2012. On the right, this is data from 2023. So the percentage of inclusion of populations has gone down now that we're in 2023 and in 2024. You may recall that I showed a different version of this image that was screenshot just within the past month, and it showed less than 1% of publications featuring Hispanic, African American, African, and what the scientists call admixed American populations, and a little over 3% of Asian populations. So perpetuating low representation, researchers often choose to build upon existing data sets. If they can make the data set larger, they're more likely to get published. And they do that when they want to demonstrate that they found something new in a very large data set. In the Ben Egan article, lack of power was the second most cited reason for excluding diverse populations. By contrast, in 2005, I mentioned the 2005 article had 146 individuals, and it's just a very interesting contrast to me. One article wrote about this article, a small sample set of 96 cases and 50 controls has generated considerable excitement in the genetics community. We no longer garner this type of excitement in small studies when we're looking at populations that have been excluded from GWAS. There are some exciting new techniques coming about. Today, researchers are pooling data. They're pooling data from many different ancestries that are primarily from outside of Europe in order to demonstrate statistically significant findings in large population samples. This is the kind of research and other innovation like this that will help us advance discovery about diverse populations. So I do want to say that there has been some innovation, but my concern is having a limited number of labs and individuals taking the steps to engage in this innovative work, rather than it being a standard that we all pursue in the same way that we pursue something like informed consent, or that we should pursue community engagement. So even as some leading scientists apply their tools, resources, and expertise, what are the standards that we need to drive the field? So I'm going to go back to the Ben Egan article again, because in addition to describing the problem, they also share some ideas for solutions. So, and I want to add this point too. They described one study that explicitly stated that the reason they excluded diverse populations was because they followed the methods from past publications as a grounds for exclusion. The authors wrote that they suspect this is common. Using standard and existing processes for analysis reduces the development costs and the need for extensive ongoing validations and explanations. So together, these trade-offs drive researchers to discard data from global populations. The authors propose some solutions by pointing to accountability measures that have guided resource allocation in healthcare. Some of you who have public health background may be very familiar with these. In light of the importance of diversity and equity, I appreciate application of a framework that's called accountability for reasonableness. This framework emphasizes fairness, legitimacy, and accountability in decision-making. Under the framework, researchers should state the reasons for excluding participant data and explain design and analysis choices that have the potential to worsen inequities. I think that we see some researchers already do this, but they do this by pointing to the trade-offs they've made and the reasons why they've chosen not to exclude populations, which in the future may not always be a good justification. Which brings me to the second item, relevance. It requires the researcher to explain how the decisions made best serve society. The authors argue that some of the trade-offs against inclusion will no longer be justifiable if these concerns can be circumvented by new analysis methods. So maybe part of the issue is creating the resource and incentives for investing in the tools and technologies that can incentivize researchers to use them to include diverse populations. The authors also recommend that statistics from minoritized populations be computed and reported as part of the primary study. So they're recommending that even if you're not doing a study primarily in a small population that's not of European ancestry, that you still include all of that data in the publication so you can build upon what we're learning about these populations. So I agree with these recommendations, but again, I worry that labs without the resources and the expertise will default to poor trade-offs. And I'd like to see the field help to build capacity. I do a lot of work in international settings as well. And early on in genomics research, there was discussion about building capacity for ethics review. And so maybe one of the things we want to think about is building capacity for equity review. The authors propose that journals mandate that submitted manuscripts justify any exclusion of participant data and analysis. They look to journals to enforce justification of exclusion of participant data. I think this should be implemented, but journals are doing a poor job of it now. Peer reviewers are offenders who permit the exclusion of diverse data and discourage the publication of diverse data. Lastly, the authors contend that assessments of transparency and relevance should change with society and methodology, and I think that is a good opportunity for ELSI research. So now that I've emphasized some changes we might need to make, let's talk about actionable measures. I think I've emphasized this point pretty well, that the benefits of diversity are not inevitable, that the benefits of genomics research and innovation for all people are not inevitable. What I have here is a quote from Dr. Alondra Nelson, who says that benefits are not inherent properties of the technology. And she's talking about AI, but I think her points are very relevant and useful for this conversation today, as she reminds us that rather any potential beneficial uses of AI tools and systems must be stewarded through innovative AI governance, including regulations, laws, standards, and norms. And this is how we govern the future. I know that it seems as if we've made so many advancements in genomics and possibly even feel as if we've moved on from genomics, just as some scientists feel as if we've moved on from GWAS to polygenic risk scores. But there's still so much work to be done in genomics if we want our genomics research data sets to be valuable and beneficial and equitable to all people. And part of my message today was to remind us of that. So as we develop equitable frameworks for AI, it's important not to neglect the fact that there's still much work to do to inscribe equity into genomics research. A necessary step for the genomics and ELSI communities is to think about how we can move forward with regard to the different types of trade-offs I discussed. We need innovation in science, and we also still need innovation in ethics. As we think about what these equity-driven frameworks might look like, I want to call your attention to this article published in September. What types of diversity are needed and why to achieve equity? What type of equity exactly are we pursuing? Equity in health outcomes, equity in an analysis. These are questions we need to ask as we develop these frameworks. The authors argue that calls for diversity often fall short of offering concrete guidance, and researchers and funders should consider the role of choices made throughout the data life cycle. I think this article speaks in favor of concerns the ELSI community can pursue further. First, we could ensure attention to diversity achieves the desired ends. So what are the ends and how can we ensure we achieve them? And second, when communities ask for it, we should ensure that lawful and as the authors say, contextually appropriate benefit sharing can be supported. Any analysis of equity in decision-making has to consider the end goals and the community interests. Next, I want to reflect on the writings of two Black scholars. I'm going to start with Dr. Dana Fulwiley. She describes the limits of what she calls quantitative equity. I think quantitative equity alone is important, but at this point, that we should aim higher. I think that message is clear from my talk today. We still have a long way to go to achieve quantitative equity, but we want to achieve much more. She speaks, for instance, of the problem of increasing representation in an environment where we still biologize race and additional ethical concerns persist. So I talked about inclusion and equity and genomics trade-offs, but there's so many issues related to community engagement, community partnerships, how we define equity in those partnerships that still also need to be addressed if we really want to include diverse populations from around the globe in research. Meanwhile, Dr. Roth writes in Captivating Technology that we may need to develop new ways of understanding equity that goes beyond statistics, law, and access, that we need to inscribe equity directly into the material underside of technologies and products, as well as their emergent practices. So these are concepts of equity that I think we should all consider as a field, those of you who are getting your PhDs in bioethics in the room, and that we should think about as we consider what our research practices are going to look like for the future of equity. To be sure, I want to highlight that bioethics and ELSI have been called out for their lack of attention to equity. Scholars such as Patricia King have noted how bioethics frameworks overlooked concerns about racial inequity, even as they were developing the Belmont report right after the syphilis experiments in Tuskegee, Alabama. that equity was not given as much attention as other values as we were responding to research abuses of the past. But as I recognize that ELSI has been, it's been documented that ELSI's main goal was not to inscribe equity either. As I acknowledge that, of course, I also want to emphasize the diligent and recent work of scholars in developing new bioethics and ELSI frameworks. So I'm citing the LEAD program here. I'm citing a recent task force that developed recommendations for equity and racial equity in bioethics departments and programs, as well as an article that highlighted how equity has not always been a funding priority. So a key takeaway is that ELSI and bioethics scholars are well equipped to address equity concerns. We have the expertise, the methodologies, but neither bioethics or ELSI historically prioritized justice and equity. Both fields have to grapple with their own inadequacies to play a role. And I think many excellent scholars are now leading this effort. Interestingly, the conversation on the ethics of trade-offs in research seems to be advancing more rapidly than the conversation about trade-offs in genomics. And I think that this could be helpful for us as genomics continues to develop or continues to be ongoing. We can learn lessons from those who are building frameworks around artificial intelligence. So some of the trade-offs discussed in AI, for instance, have to do with the explainability, for example, of an algorithm, and how explainability comes at a cost, and that cost can be accuracy, or improved accuracy comes at the cost of explainability. The World Health Organization, which I'm citing because it's an international organization and genomics is a global endeavor, has provided some recommendations for ethical artificial intelligence. But at the same time, while it notes that there are trade-offs that can make a researcher choose for precision, for example, over diversity or over equity, the WHO says that we must still be committed to inclusive and equitable approaches to avoid biases. And also says it's not enough to call for adherence to values such as reproducibility, transparency, fairness, and human dignity, but actually to develop the frameworks for it. And so I think it's really helpful to think about the fact that we may make decisions for scientific expediency within the context of AI. How are AI scholars addressing that decision making so that they can make equity a priority as we develop the algorithms for AI, and what can we learn from them to help us do the same in genomics research? Some further ideas I have are, of course, we want to include our ELSI scholars and colleagues who are thinking about equity at the start of and design of the research process, that there should always be sufficient funding for that kind of work to take place, and that there should be opportunities for bidirectional learning. So ELSI scholars will need to better understand these trade-offs and the technicalities around these trade-offs. In addition, I'm concerned about the peer review process and wonder if there are some alternative rigorous dissemination models beyond just peer review that we could start thinking about so that we can continue to get data out there. A lot of scientists are using preprint models now to contribute to open data sharing. What other models are rigorous that we can pursue so that we don't have to rely on a process that is continuing to argue that researchers need to have larger samples, or that one comment that's often made is, well, why haven't you found this in a European ancestry population? And which leads to peer reviewers encouraging authors to always compare everything they're finding against a European standard. And so we need until peer reviewers and journals are able to change their practices, we may need some other models to ensure that there are some incentives and dissemination of this research. Recently, in 2024, scholars in genetics, ELSI, bioethics, and health equity published recommendations for advancing genomics to improve equity. The authors write that health equity in genomics means that all groups, populations, social contexts, and environments are considered in all aspects of human genomics research. This includes the development of genomic technologies and the design of genomic studies, as well as access to data and implementation. So this box on the right includes the main recommendations from the workshop participants that NHGRI convened, as well as the literature. I only seek to add to these recommendations that the field develop governance and research ethics mandates that will help us implement these kinds of recommendations. Workshop attendees recommended that research agencies provide funding to evaluate health equity and integrate health equity considerations into genomics research programs. I believe that developing accountability measures as well will bolster these efforts. So I encourage everyone who's interested in genomics research equity to read this article and see the recommendations if you have not already. And I'm going to end with this theme of exploring the silences. Genomics wants to tell a story linking history, environment, and health. But due to many factors, the field is still prioritizing the stories of only a few. Progress in equity will require us to go beyond recruitment to analyzing the data we collect and finding ethical and equitable ways to tell the story of humanity. We will also have to explore the silences around the decisions, methods, and tools that undermine our efforts to advance equity on a regular basis. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was incredible and provided us with some amazing insights and some amazing ways to explore equity in genomics in ways that we haven't really spent enough time doing. We're really lucky to have some time at the end of today's session for the next 25 minutes or so to get some questions both from the audience here. I also want to acknowledge the great number of people online who have joined us nationally and internationally for this lecture. So I want to thank you all for being both here in person but also online. We have someone monitoring the chat to add any questions to our dialogue here, and we have a microphone that will be passed around for anyone who would like to ask any questions. I'm going to ask one question to take my own prerogative to ask one question, which is we have a lot of students and trainees in the audience and junior professionals who are starting off in this field, many of whom are working in institutional frameworks that don't take these things to account enough. Do you have any recommendations for our trainees, our early scholars, to try to do the work that you think needs to happen in order to try to build this kind of equitable system that I think is so vital, especially as new scholars in the field who may not feel as empowered yet to try to make the changes necessary? Are there things that we can do as senior faculty? Are there things that we can do institutionally or as a field? So I'd just love your response to kind of thinking about how do we make sure our trainees and our early scholars can be part of this dialogue and really push this forward.
Well, first of all, you're here and we're having this conversation today. So that's one great start. I get this question a lot from geneticists when I give talks about the way we use race in genomics research, and also talks about diversity and inclusion. And geneticists and data scientists also want to know, when I'm working within a larger institutional framework and I'm powerless, how can I make a difference? And so it's a really great question that crosses disciplines, because we all are stuck with the house that genomics and bioethics built, and a reference to Isabella Wilkerson. And there's no indication that we're dismantling that house. So we all have to work within it. And so I think being a part of these kinds of conversations and journal clubs and finding allies in your university who are also thinking about these questions, because a lot of it is also learning and understanding. What is a GWAS? Why do geneticists talk about linkage, disequilibrium, and confounding all of the time? What does that mean? So part of it is learning and understanding what the issues are really well. And then the other is we are in a great, hopefully we are all, I know I know we're living in a country where there are some parts of the country that are trying to eradicate these conversations, but if you're in a part of a country at an institution where you can have a cup of coffee with someone who really cares about these issues, you hopefully are in a scholarly environment where you could talk about solutions. And some of the best conversations I had here at Case Western were over potlucks and at coffee. We had scheming sessions, remember? When we would talk about future ideas for research. And so I encourage you to just have as many conversations as you can if you can't challenge your professor outside of the classroom to help you better understand. But it's a major problem. It's a major problem for people who have to take exams where the exams ask them about the use of race as a biological framework. And it's also a major problem when we're thinking about diversity and inclusion in the workforce, because we want to recruit people from diverse backgrounds, but we're then requiring them to think within these same frameworks. And there's limited mobility to really do the work in the way you want to do it because of institutional policies, institutional laws, institutional barriers. So there's a lot of this house that we have to work on. A lot of renovations are needed. Dr. Hoffman.
Thanks so much, Shawneequa. That was really great and really well done. The same conversations, as you acknowledged, are happening in AI about inclusion of diverse enough data in training data to develop the algorithms. And I'm just wondering, is there a difference between the concerns in genetics and AI, or are they identical?
Yes. I think I can say simply, as someone who's not a geneticist and who's not a data scientist, that there are different problems, different questions, and different goals of the two. And so I don't want to conflate the two fields and say everything is exactly the same. But I do see some similarities. So for example, if you're training a data set to be more diverse, it may take some time, it may take longer for the data set to have prediction accuracy. And I see that similarity in genomics, where if you are including diverse people of diverse ancestries, it will take more time for the scientists to figure out confounding and to understand the complexities and then report them. And so if you're looking to publish quickly and you want to use your research dollars the most efficiently and get your work done as rapidly as possible, for those particular issues of trade-offs, I see a lot of similarities. But then when it comes to issues like transparency or fairness, I'll admit I haven't given those topics as much thought, but it's very possible that how you define transparency is different. I had a conversation with data scientists and geneticists that I was working with in July, and we were all trying to figure out what we meant by fair. Because there's so many different definitions for FAIR, and there's even the FAIR acronym. And so we had to make sure that when we were writing about what FAIR means, we're from different disciplines, but we all wanted to make sure we meant the same thing. And so I think a topic like that might be where your question comes in. Well, how are the issues different? How are the questions different? And I think they're not exactly the same. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. Yes, in the back.
So I'm Scott Moore, and I'm an assistant professor in the Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing, and I'm also on the IRB here. And I thought that when you talked about building capacity for equity review, that was a really important statement that resonated a lot with me, because often when we're reviewing protocols, our job is not to look at the science per se as much as it is the human protections
of individuals.
Of individuals.
Not groups, not communities.
That's exactly right. And this is sort of the challenge that I'm trying to figure out. How do we help people to see that equity is a human protections issue, and that it's something that deserves to be sort of included in those same frameworks? And I think I think that the IRB here is great. Don't think this is sort of like the larger picture, I think. But I think that we have a lot of things that we do as IRBs that are often sort of nods to the idea that we understand that we have people from outside the institution who are on our IRB. We try and include people that are from vulnerable populations in reviews of those types of protocols where it's appropriate and things like that. But I think we're missing the boat on this idea of what equity is a human protections issue, because by being absent, by being kept silent, populations are not benefiting from the work that we're thinking that we're doing.
And I was particularly, I use that article about don't ignore data from diverse populations almost all the time, because I think it's really disturbing that people are contributing to research and we're choosing to exclude that data. But I think your question, it's a really tough one, because it's not only that you have people from outside of the institution, but you have people with different priorities and interests, including your institution, relating to securing funding. And you have faculty who have to publish or perish, and scientists who've been working within a model all along where it's condoned to exclude those populations. And the first thing a scientist might say to you is, but there are 10 publications that just came out that do the same thing you're telling me I can't do. And it's really hard to, what do you say in that situation? You're now saying, well, I want you to be better than the field. And so I don't have answers for you, but I understand the challenges that an IRB likely faces, especially because the goals of IRBs typically, if they are not, some IRBs I do think are thinking about community harms and the potential harms to communities, especially in light of, some of you may have heard of the Havasupai case, where there was a lawsuit that settled, but because it settled, it didn't become law. But people are thinking about the potential for harms to communities and engaging communities like that to prevent future harms, but it's not law. And so that's one of the reasons why I think it's important for us as a field to come together and think about the kinds of standards we need to agree on that can be the floor that we can mandate. And I know that that's the word that's going to get me into trouble. But I think we have to start thinking about it, just like we do for informed consent and for minimizing research risks. If we truly are committed to having equitable research inclusion and discovery, and we need people with the expertise, health equity experts, bioethics experts, legal experts. We need people with expertise on the team from the very beginning. They should be a part of those proposals to help do that work until we have the laws to help guide us. But the law is usually only the floor. The law will never prepare us for all of the future technologies and future challenges that we are going to face related to equity. So it's only part of the solution. We'll also need to think about our culture and our community and how we can work together on achieving our goals. So that's a long way of saying I'm not sure. It's very difficult. I think the law can play a role, but some other factors too.
So I've got a long walk down there.
Oh, thank you. I was looking back here thinking, first of all, Shawneequa, your talk was excellent. You covered so much territory. I was like, wait, stop, hold on. Say it again. What? Thank you for treating the subject matter so seriously and thoughtfully. I want to say something about equity. And it was something that you said that made me think about this. Equity is a concept, a construct that is, it's really profound in how it helps us aspire to, I don't know, moral goodness, you know, I mean, it's like, what a good thing to aspire to. But when you begin to anchor that on the ground, and you ask yourself the question, or a community the question, what do we mean by equitable?
Yes.
How do we articulate that in this context or another context? And I think, in fact, there, you just said right before you stopped speaking, you were calling our attention to the importance of thinking about the cultural settings and so on and so on. And I think that there's something more that we can add to what you've said, which is the recognition of how that shifts and how that changes. We are adaptable. We are mobile. Mm-hmm. We change. Mm-hmm. I mean, good God in heaven, who can believe I'm 72 years old and still dancing in the kitchen with a bad knee?
I love it.
Like, okay, the dancing is good. My ability to do that has shifted. Mm-hmm. And as individuals, as communities, that shifting, we need to account for that.
Absolutely.
And be reflective about it.
Absolutely.
And always, I think, I love it that you talk so much today about equity. Always, we need to think about what do we mean by equity in this situation.
I think that's incredibly important, because you can't make the decisions that you need to achieve equity unless you're able to define where you want to go.
Right. Where you want to, I agree, Shawneequa, I agree. Where you want to go within the constraints that we have around us. I really like it that you called attention to the house that we have helped build and construct, and that we now face it's like we want to push beyond the constructs that we have built.
Right.
And we need to think out of the box. I'm talking too much. Aaron, take this.
We have a question online.
Oh, okay. And then we have a question from Dr. Huss here too.
Okay, so we actually have a couple here. I'll read the first one. It is safe to say that there is the needed talk about increasing diversity in genomics going on. Can we say the same about how underrepresented populations should be included in genomics research? And do you think we should be having as much talk in terms of how the inclusion of underrepresented populations should be achieved?
Definitely. We absolutely should be having conversation, not just about diversity, but what does it take to achieve that diversity? And I think the rationale for that is because we are operating within a history that's been exploitative and extractive, and that there's that, and then there are different cultural beliefs, values, and needs around the world. And so engaging communities and thinking about how equity should be achieved is very important, and it will take time to achieve. And I should be talking to the camera. I'm looking at you because you asked the question, but and it'll take time. So I think how we achieve it is also critically important, and we are working on frameworks for that, including community engagement. But that's why investment in community engagement and ELSI is also needed, because we can say it's important to engage communities, but if we don't have the funding to do that engagement, then almost always a team is going to find some other way to at least get some advisory input. But engagement with communities and the proper engagement would be the ideal.
Just because the next question is actually, I think, very in line with your response from this last question. So I'll just ask, a different participant asked, how do we get the right people in the room who can help us implement some of these guidelines for equity in genomics?
Well, that article I listed at the end talks a great deal about workforce diversity, and also including people, individual people who are not typically a part of the conversation. So They even talk about how sometimes the same experts might be asked to be a part of providing consulting advice, and how important it is to draw from different types of experts, different disciplines, HBCUs, other types of institutions that are not always a part of the problem, that are not always a part of problem solving. My concern is that our questions are developing so rapidly as we also rapidly seek to include more populations in research. Our technologies are changing and developing rapidly. And I worry we don't have enough people interested in what's happening to join those expert task forces. We need more folks from around the world who may not identify as ELSI, but who can provide input on ethically and equitably advancing technology. How do we get those people to come and be interested and be involved as experts, in addition to engaging the communities that we not only want them in the room, but we want them to be partners? What does that take, and what barriers do we have to overcome so that they can be partners? And all of this sounds difficult. It sounds complex. And scientists a lot of scientists want to access the data that they have, produce new findings, publish them, because that's also a good outcome, making discoveries. But I hugely believe how important it is that we have to work together. I can't remember the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I really do think that that would change things for emerging technologies if we could develop frameworks that just allow that kind of collaboration a little bit more. Jess?
Hi, I wanted to find out a little bit more about the global aspect, and in particular, I'm thinking about a lot of this, what you've presented, looking at who's involved. I'm sure there's a global cast of characters, but some of it is obviously going to be dominated by United States or UK or maybe Western Europe. And I'm just wondering what's going on in terms of capacity building in other parts of the world, for example, in African countries. I know that there's a lot of really, it's like a priority in South Africa and Johannesburg and stuff like that. They're talking about, like the fourth industrial revolution that's very technology based and so forth. And, I have a friend that was down there in the philosophy department who was involved with that kind of thing. And I was just wondering if you could say, is the situation, because when I see most of what you talked about, it actually to me looks pretty bleak. It's not good where we are. And there's some promise, and you're trying to push some things forward. And I'm just wondering, what's it look like, in some of the African countries? Where is there genomics research going on there? Is it being done by diverse groups of scientists? Is there a lot of diversity, racial and ethnic diversity in who's included and so forth? And what does that look like? Does it look any different than this? Is it similar?
Great question. I actually deleted a few slides related to building capacity in some Mexican and South American countries that I'll talk about because I wanted to stick within my time. So I'm glad you asked, because now you're giving me a chance to talk about these things. So there is a major effort to advance research on the African continent. And one of the reasons Africa is particularly important is because we all come from Africa. It's the cradle of humanity. And there's more diversity in Africa than anywhere in the world when we think of the people who've stayed there over the years. And when we include only a small percentage of people from the African diaspora or the African ancestries, we learn a lot. We discover many different genetic variants that can help us understand genetic variants in other places as well. And we can understand more about the diverse people who live around the world. So there's a scientific imperative to include populations from African countries. And there have been various efforts. Patty was involved in the HapMap project, which involved informed consent and genomic sampling in Africa. More recently, the Human Heredity and Health in Africa project. It was a 10-year project that Dr. Charles Rotimi played a role in helping to develop. It was funded by the Wellcome Trust in the UK and the NIH in the United States. And the goal was for African investigators to be principal investigators on that grant. So you had to, the PIs were all in Africa. To be a partner outside of Africa, you had to be interested in building capacity in Africa. African researchers also received about a 23-month embargo in total so that they could be the first to publish the data that they collected. We have an extractive history where scientists partner with investigators in low and middle income countries. They take the data, they go back to the US or Europe, and then they publish about a disease that's prevalent where they live, and there are no benefits, there's no return. No one in the low and middle income country sees that data ever again. So H3 Africa was an attempt to try to combat that and build capacity for genomics research, ethics investigation, bioinformatic networks, mentorship, and different types of networks across the African continent. Funding for that ended a few years ago, but now there's the Data Science and Health in Africa initiative, and that group is doing data science work in Africa. Some of those investigators were also H3 Africa investigators, and so they're building on the work that they've done, but also building more data science capacity. Could there be a lot more? Absolutely. Would it be nice if more countries, not just in Africa, but around the globe? We do have some countries that are building their own pangenomes, building their own genomics research capacity. What would it be like if more countries, low and middle income countries, thought about how they could invest themselves in building capacity? Of course, is also an issue. But these efforts are underway. One thing I'm really excited about is when investigators from native indigenous nations, there's some investigators I've been reading about in Mexico and in other countries that are finding new ways to collaborate, where if they collaborate with an investigator from a local country that may be in a low and middle income country or a local community, they're working with those scientists to help not only learn about the community values and interests, but also teaching the science, making genetic information available on a cloud, and helping the scientists who they're partnering with understand sequencing and informatics. Of course, you have to have the resources and the infrastructure to do a lot of large-scale genomics work, but to the extent that partners are able to learn how to sequence, work together as partners, as scientists, that kind of work is emerging. And I think that US scientists could learn from those scientists who are making capacity building a part of their research projects. And there are some labs in the US who are also engaging in capacity building in partnership with scientists in Africa, for example. But it would be great if it were more systematic and standardized. But you're right, in many ways it does seem bleak, but there are a lot of great projects, and projects like the ones I've just started, that I just mentioned, where we're seeing innovation in how people are partnering that we can learn from and try to scale up.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. My name's Jacob James Rich. I'm a PhD student here. I mostly do ecological and public health research, so I'm not as familiar with genomics. So could you please help me understand, why exactly are various groups of people discarded in these studies? Why aren't they included? Are they literally just looking at precedent, seeing that they just previous research discarded them and they're doing that? Or are there like methodological reasons for why they might want possibly a more homogeneous population? Like what is actually motivating these researchers to do that?
Well, I talked about confounding. That's the #1 researchers give, that if they have diverse ancestries included in a sample, that there's the potential for confounding and not being able to understand the associations that they're seeing. And so scientists try to make a population as homogeneous as they possibly can to reduce the potential for confounding. But even European populations are diverse. They're diverse in sex, zip code, environments, as well as ancestries. And so we have to understand that in the real world, we're not homogenous people. And even within the populations that we label as European ancestry, African ancestry, there's just so much diversity within them. But confounding is one reason. Another I mentioned is that our GWAS sample sizes have grown to the thousands, and in some cases millions. And so journal editors expect to see large sample sizes. But if you go into a community that has been previously excluded from research and you discover something new, even if you have meaningful results, it's the peer reviewers, it's very hard to get past peer review and get that article published. Even scientists who are developing new methods to look at different populations still have to grapple with peer reviewers who are stuck in a European canon mental frame. Why doesn't this look like the numbers from Europe? Why doesn't it look like what we're finding in European ancestries? And it's people whose careers are based on getting published may choose not to walk the path less traveled because they need to get those publications out. Linkage disequilibrium. In different countries, you have in different parts of the world, you have different scientific and technical factors that may require different expertise or resources or time to better understand the population you're studying. And so it's also methodologically efficient for scientists to study European ancestry populations. So these are all technical and scientific barriers to diversity. And so a large part of what I'm trying to argue is that we better understand these scientific and technical barriers. What are the alternatives and options if we want our data sets to look a lot more diverse? And how do we pursue them? And when do we have a duty to pursue them?
I want to make one more question. We have one more online question.
No, no.
I was very interested in your wonderful talk to hear about, so just as you were just saying, that there are incentives for not trying to increase diversity in genomic studies. And so on the other side, you could have carrots or you could have sticks, right? I mean, I think we talked a little bit about sticks, possible mandates, possible funding mandates or IRB mandates, don't know, institutional mandates. What about carrots? Are there ways that this can be made more attractive? Maybe tearing down some barriers, maybe emphasizing the ways that results can be more broadly applicable, more impactful, result in possible future interventions that work for more people and are taken up by broader populations. That could be a financial incentive as well. I don't know.
No, I really appreciate your question because it's important. And in this particular article here, and in most articles, you will see discussion about the carrots and the values and the incentives. I think for me, having a law background and also being very impatient with really small incremental change, I tend to think, well, what can we do to make people change? And that's how we have more civil rights in the United States, because of civil rights laws. So I'm a huge advocate of law playing a role if we do it the right way. But so many different, this article in particular talks about funding mechanisms for people who want to address equity in genomics. If you have an idea where you can research a solution so that we can help make genomics more diverse from the time of recruitment to the workforce, there are funding mechanisms for that. There's interest in it. There's interest in studying the systems that prevent barriers. So I think providing funding is a great incentive. I think H3 Africa was a wonderful incentive, providing money so that African scientists could be PIs and overcome any barriers that related to resources locally, including the lack of legal infrastructure. Through that kind of funding investment, that's a value. I think it's worth it to think about what it will take to get scientists to make these changes. But as I mentioned, I worry about resources, expertise, skill, and what kind of funding we can give so people who feel as if they don't have the time or the capacity to do this research right, what kind of funding can we do so that they can do it the right way? I've noticed that more grants require a discussion about diverse perspectives in the proposals, and also some grants want to see an ELSI team as part of that, and so that incentivizes scientists to include ELSI people from the beginning in their work. I applaud that. I think that's really wonderful. But in addition to these incentives, I'd like us to think seriously about how we can change our governance mechanisms and hold people accountable as well.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was unbelievable. I just wanted to, we have a couple things to show. This is the Patty Marshall lecture plaque that hangs in our department. Her name has been added to it.
Wonderful.
So you'll be part of our department every day.
Take a picture.
Just a little token of appreciation for being here from us at Change and Bioethics here at Case Western. We're so excited for you to join us.
It's beautiful.
This is for you. Thank you so much.
Thank
you
you
all
so
for being here. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
For those of you who are in person or reception or outside, waiting for us, a little food and beverages. And thank you all for learning with us today. Thank you.
This is wonderful. Can I place it in the
Yes,
box
yeah,
to
please.
keep it safe?